plant friends, welcome back to my channel, Planty Princess 92. My name is Ashley, and today we are going to be doing a video that goes along with my semi-hydro basics playlist, specifically on overwatering while growing semi-hydroponically. Now, I know that may sound like a little weird. You may not think that is something that can actually happen when growing semi-hydroponically, but it's not overwatering in the sense of, you're watering your plant and the soil soaks up too much water, you give it too much water. It's overwatering in the sense that the plant's roots either are coming in contact with too much water, they're sitting in the reservoir of water. Either way, that plant is getting too much water, so it definitely is getting overwatered. This is something that can 100% happen in semi-hydroponics. It's a little more difficult to overwater your plants growing semi-hydroponically, but it's definitely not impossible. So today I'm going to be repotting both of my Variegated Monstera Adansonii mint plants, because now these plants are growing actually at a pretty quick pace, especially being winter time. I do keep these in my Vivo Sun grow tent, so they are getting really bright indirect light. They're getting a very nice amount of humidity, and they're sitting in a very warm temperature, but they just aren't doing well in the leca, and I think it's because of how fast they are growing. Now, like I said, they're growing great. Every time I get a new leaf though, I lose a leaf. And not only are the leaves growing really fast, but the roots are growing at, they're just growing way too fast that I'm constantly having to repot the plant so that way the roots are sitting above the reservoir water line, and I think I'm disturbing the plant. So to solve this problem, I don't know if I'm going to keep them in soil permanently or just until the root system kind of and it's a very established root system, so I don't know, maybe it needs to establish itself more for the plant, I'm not sure. But so I don't know if I'm going to keep them in soil permanently or just wait till the root system slows down on its growth a little bit, but that's something we will determine later on. But for now, they definitely need to be repotted because, like I said, I'm losing leaves due to yellowing because the roots are constantly in the reservoir, so they are getting overwatered. And I can't keep repotting them because that is just disturbing them way too much. I'm literally having to repot them once every 2 weeks or so, and that is way too often to repot a plant. So currently right now, the leaves, all of the leaves on my plant do have a slight tint of yellow to them. I'm not sure if the camera is really catching it well, but they definitely do. Now, I think they're salvageable. Obviously, they're not going to turn back to pure green, but I think if I solve this problem right now, they'll stop with the yellowing and they'll continue to grow really nicely. So we're going to get these out of leca. They will be staying on their moss poles. The only difference is they are going to be potted in soil. Now, I know my regular Monstera Adansonii and most Monsteras in general really do like a really chunky, light, fluffy, airy mixture. So I already pre-mixed some soil here. And in this mix, I just used your standard potting mix. I added in a small amount of sphagnum moss, just enough to retain some of that moisture, but not hold too much of it in. I have some perlite in here. I have a little bit of orchid bark. And honestly, I don't have as much orchid bark as I would like to have in here. I kind of ran out, so I'm working with the amount that I had. So I definitely probably would put 1/4 of the amount of soil orchid bark. But like I said, I have less than that just because I'm working with what I had. Either way, I think this will do fine. As you can see, it's very light, it's very fluffy, it's not real heavy, so it's not going to, even with the sphagnum moss, it's not going to soak up a crazy amount of water and stay wet forever, which is, I think, what this plant needs. It needs to be able to drain. So we'll get started. I'm gonna empty these out, put them in their pots, and then I'll kind of just tell you how I will care for them in the soil opposed to how I was caring for them previously. So carefully now, I'm going to use wire cutters to remove the moss pole out of here, because I do have the moss pole kind of intertwined in these wires to kind of keep it stable inside this net pot. So we'll start with emptying the pot and we'll go from there. So now you can see how extensive the root system is, which is why I'm not sure why the root system is still growing so prolifically, but it is. So that's why I've made the decision to pot these up in soil, because like I said, I just can't keep disturbing these plants by repotting them, pulling them out of their pot, putting them above the reservoir water line. It's just too much for the plant to handle. So aside from them getting overwatered, they're not necessarily getting overwatered because I'm not caring for them. They're getting overwatered because I'm not going to pull these out of their pot every week. It's just not healthy. And because of that, the roots were sitting in the water, obviously more than I would like them to be. I don't want them in the water at all, but you know, I thought it would be better to just leave them for as long as possible rather than pull them up out of there, but that wasn't working, so this is the solution we're going with. But anyways, this is the one that I am trying to air layer. It is starting to grow a root, so I'm super excited, but that will be an update in a whole nother video. So I'll quickly just get both of these out. I think that will be the easiest. Actually, I'm gonna get this moss pole out first because my bowl is full of leca, so I'll dump the other leca into here. So I'm basically just cutting this moss pole out of here right now. Okay, so I have the first one out. Now we'll just get the other one going. And again, with the extensive root system, you can see even on this one as well that the root system is really heavy, it's really thick, it's nice and luscious. The roots are very healthy. So at least there was no, water damage or root rot to these roots from sitting in the reservoirs. That's because they weren't really sitting there for a long period of time. But again, it was obviously long enough to do damage to the leaves. Now just up close, I'll just show you if you can see the tint of yellow to it. Normally this is a really minty light green color, so you definitely can see the tint of yellow to the leaves. It's not so bad that the leaves look like they are yellow, obviously, but I definitely noticed that they're starting to yellow, and I definitely want to handle that before this happens. So again, real quick, I'll just talk a little bit about growing semi-hydroponically with the watering. There's a couple things you definitely want to make sure of. You want to make sure that you sit your plant up high enough in the pot that you can have your pot filled 1/3 of the way, so that would be about here on this pot, with water in the reservoir, but your roots sit above that. Now your roots can definitely sit well above that, because say your water line is here, your roots don't have to be here, because through capillary action, the water soaks up. So your roots can be all the way up here, and if you're filling your pot 1/3 of the way with water or the reservoir, the leca will be wet enough and soak up enough water that the roots will get plenty of water. So aside from, the roots being above that line, you also want to make sure that you aren't filling the pot more than 1/3 of the way, even if they're still not in the water. So if your roots are all the way up here, you still don't want to fill your pot halfway with the water or the reservoir up till it hits the halfway point of the pot, because then the leca is constantly going to be soaked. It's going to absorb too much water around the roots, and that is what is going to start the yellowing. It's going to give it that overwatering effect. You can get root rot, like I said, the yellowing leaves, stem rot, all that yucky stuff that we definitely don't like on our plants. So, and I mean, it's just the same with soil. Soil, obviously it's caused a little differently because like I said, you're pouring the water directly in the soil, but at least with soil, which is why I'm switching it, I can control how much water goes around these roots based on the fact that, you know, I couldn't control how fast the roots were going down. I couldn't really control, other than repotting it and disturbing the roots, that they were sitting in the reservoirs. You know, now I can control that. I think I'm definitely going to bottom water these plants because, again, I don't want to overwater in soil. When you're dumping through the top, you can keep putting as much water. You can put water even more than the soil can soak up and really overwater your plants. But when bottom watering, the soil will only soak up as much water as it can hold. So that's what I'm definitely going to do. So we'll start by potting these plants up. I have my first moss pole ready to go. And I'm definitely also going to make sure that I have a good amount of soil on the bottom. That way the roots don't grow out of the bottom too quickly once again. So we'll start with this lady here. And I'm just going to carefully put them in. I didn't want to put these in a pot that's too deep. So I got these little 5-inch pots, and I think they'll be perfect for these plants. So here's my first plant all potted up. I left maybe about a 1/4 inch from the rim. That way, if I do ever decide to top water, it doesn't overflow. I always do that just in case, because there have been a couple times where plants that I normally bottom water, I happen to top water, especially if they really need a watering. I'm just giving them a quick dosage. That way they don't, you know, wilt or die. But then I come back later after a few days that it dries and then go ahead and bottom water it. You definitely want to compress the soil a little bit, but you don't want to compress it too much that it suffocates the roots. But either way, it does compact a little bit when you do give it a top watering. It compacts a little slower if you bottom water, because then obviously the top of the soil doesn't normally get wet. But either way, this one is good to go. I'm really excited to see if this will fix the problem I'm having with this plant. I am almost 100% sure that that is the cause of what's going on here, the yellowing leaves. So, I mean, I can't think of any other reason why they would yellow, especially because this plant is growing so great. So this is definitely going to be my main solution, and we'll see how this plant continues to grow. So we'll get the second one all potted up. So here is the second one all done. They look cute. They look pretty much just the same as they did in leca, except they're in nursery pots instead of mesh pots, and they're in soil instead of leca. Like I said, I am very excited to see how these grow. I will definitely keep you guys updated on if this fixed that problem or not. But I want to just point out a quick fact real quick before I wrap this up. Whether this fixes the problem for my variegated Adansonias or not, overwatering in semi-hydroponics is still a thing, whether it's the cause of the yellowing leaves on my plant or not. So I just definitely want to make sure you're aware of your situations when you are growing semi-hydroponically. So just keep that in mind. You want to make sure you're not filling the reservoir too high. You're not planting the roots too low. When the roots do get that low, you're repotting. And if it's a plant that is growing too much, maybe it's not meant for leca or semi-hydroponics. Maybe it's not meant for semi-hydroponics at that particular time, because you will just disturb the roots if you have to repot it too much. Thank you guys again for joining me in another video. I hope this was very helpful to you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're interested in the content I provide. And as always, every plant's a princess. Bye.